All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. This is a roadmap session that we're having as kind of a tease into what we're going to do at Replay. And Replay is our annual conference that is going to happen in September. Oh gosh, September 12th, 13th, and 14th. How could I not forget? I remember those days. And at Replay this year, we're going to be with lots of product announcements. Deeper sessions on roadmap and that sort of stuff. But we really wanted to rally the team to, kind of go through the roadmap as we see it fits right now. And that's really what today is all about. Thank you, everybody, for joining from wherever you're at in this world. Like I said earlier, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't even know what day it is for you, but it's Wednesday here in beautiful Denver, Colorado. So thanks for everybody for joining. So if you get to the next slide, it's just some really quick logistics before we get started. Gosh, by all means, roadmap is nothing but for you all. And for you all to ask questions during this session would just be fantastic. The more questions, the better. This is the future of where the Temporal project is going, not just kind of, the way that we dispense and deliver it for y'all, but really the project in general. We have all the product managers from the team on the call today. And your questions and our answers will help kind of direct the future of where the product is going. So we would love for this to be interactive. So definitely encourage you there. And then before anybody asks, somebody always asks, right? The recording of this webinar will absolutely be available as soon as we can kind of process it and get it up on our YouTube channel. So, but we'll send out links as follow up to this session, and I'm sure you can just check it out on our YouTube channel. So. All right, everybody. So hello, my name is Jim Walker. I am I'm working product marketing here at Temporal. I've been here about 8 months or so, and I enjoy that I am joined by some really great product managers, of which I think only 2 of them were here the day I started. We've grown our team considerably as we kind of start to increase our velocity in terms of what we can do here as a company to meet the needs of all you all that are using Temporal out there. So I want to invite the team to join me now. Pierre, that means turn your camera on. Thanks, buddy. Just want to be really clear, pal. I am joined by Jonathan Lacefield. Jonathan, want to raise your hand? He looks like that picture. Rylan Goldstein. Tasha, last names. I don't want to mess it up. I'm sorry. Pierre, again, another last name I don't want to mess up. And then Matt Bernier, who is also, we got a couple of Coloradans here today. So we got three, half of us are in Colorado. So we're going to walk through the roadmap today, y'all. And as I noted at the top of the call, look, at a roadmap is directional. These are things that we are absolutely working on. And really, we encourage you all to contribute because, what we do beyond, a half of a year of work and beyond. I mean, you all develop apps. You know how roadmaps work. We're listening to y'all to help affect what we do. So again, I encourage QA, but remember, roadmaps always come with a caveat. You aren't going to see any exact timing here. I think you're going to hear a couple of things that will be announced at Replay. We're definitely foreshadowing some things that are absolutely on board for that, right, y'all? I'm sure there's going to be some nice consternation there, but that's cool. So let's just kick it all off. So as I noted at the top of the thing, Replay September 12th to 14th. As for joining this webinar, please, by all means, if you want to attend, you like this and some other content that we'll do, we're giving a 20% discount. So webinar 20 is the code you use to actually register if you want to go get a ticket. That'd be great, y'all. Love to see you in Seattle in September. So the roadmap at Temporal is really kind of focused around 3 key themes. Our teams are widely spread across, some of the core of Temporal and like the capabilities around workflows and executions and activities and all the great things and the value that you all get as developers. And we spend a fair amount of time in building our own managed service, which is Temporal Cloud, which, I wouldn't be a marketer if I didn't say it was the fastest and baddest way to use Temporal. But, that's what I do here. But it really is. We spend a lot of time on the control plane and how we go about persistence so we can scale and meet your latency issues and just make it super easy and dead simple for you all to run Temporal Server. So, we kind of have these 2 sides of our world, but when we really look at our product and you take it as a holistically across our product, we have 3 themes. One being approachability, the other being adaptability, and the third applicability. We're going to talk through these three areas, and we're going to start with approachable. And approachable to me is probably one of these things that when I first started at Temporal, somebody was like, "Hey, man, we need to make Temporal simple," and I'm like, "We don't want to make Temporal. We're going to simplify and kind of soften some of the hard edges." But I think the beauty of Temporal is in its complexity. We do want to make it a bit more, a better experience, regardless of your skill level around your usage of Temporal. And so in this set of features that we're going to walk through, that's what we really focus on. So I'm going to kick it over to Jonathan. And Jonathan's going to introduce kind of at the top level some of the things that we're doing on the approachable side of our roadmap.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. So we have a lot on our plates that we're delivering this second half of this year. As you can see, some of the highlights here. We're going to dive into three areas today. Tasha and I are going to walk through cloud automation and what's happening in the .NET world, as well as what we're doing with IDE plugins. So for the sake of time, we're just going to hop in. There we go. Awesome. So as Jim mentioned, the adoption of Temporal Cloud has been tremendous across organizations, small and large. And the engagement from y'all and the Temporal community has been even better. The passion, expertise, and challenges Temporal Cloud users share with us has helped us understand an important experience to improve, and that is the capabilities to automate Temporal Cloud. And so your feedback has directly shaped our plans to provide automation capabilities. And really, we want to provide administrators the ability to automate the creation and management of namespaces, as well as automate user onboarding and access management. So let me share a little context, around what I mean by that. So we received a lot of feedback to date, asking for us to publish a cloud operations API, some kind of programmatic interface to automate both, individual and bulk operations for namespace and user management. And the most common feedback we've heard to date is, give us an API, whether it's gRPC and or REST. But we're also hearing feedback around providing an operator, whether that's Terraform or Kubernetes based, and really to help the folks that are treating Temporal Cloud as infrastructure as code. In addition to this, some of the experienced Temporal Cloud users have been using the CLI for Temporal Cloud that we call tCloud or TCLD. And they've asked us to, provide some enhancements, for the CLI. Along with that feedback, though, we definitely hear the feedback loud and clear that the API is preferred over CLI. And finally, we hear a lot of feedback in this area around authentication for these tools, and specifically the request to provide authentication mechanisms through an API key, as well as to provide an identity through a service account, so people can automate cloud operations through a robot user versus a human user. And when we dive into this feedback a little more, we're kind of seeing a trend of three different use cases for automation. And the first, we see a lot of people that are kind of wrapping Temporal Cloud to provide self-service capabilities through their organization. And essentially, administrators want to provide their users with a self-service capability to create namespaces or grant access to namespaces. And this capability to self-serve should be through the standardized internal tools and kind of hide and abstract a little bit of Temporal. So for example, some of our users are using ServiceNow as a way to spin up new namespaces or to request access to a namespace. So we want to support that use case fully. And then, we also hear two other use cases, and they're kind of interrelated. The first is, how can we onboard offboard users? And by this, people are asking us to either provide automation capabilities, again, through an API, but sometimes that onboard offboard experience is being requested so that we can synchronize to an identity provider. We're going to talk about identity provider synchronization a little bit later in this presentation. So we're going to focus more on the automation capabilities today. And in addition to that user lifecycle onboard offboard, we also hear a lot of feedback around how can I use the concept of a team, and to associate a team, maybe I have groups in my IDP or SAML, and I think I can tie permissions to namespaces based on this team or group concept. So let me just share a couple of highlights of what we've done based on this feedback. So today, our CLI, Temporal Cloud, we've provided some new affordances recently. So if you haven't used Temporal Cloud CLI in a little while, go check it out. It's on our website. Very easy install through Brew. And you'll have the ability now to automate the operations to create managed namespaces, work with search attributes, certificates, and then as well as to add users and manage user access. So T-Cloud's already there for some of this capabilities, and that's a feature we've released recently. In addition to that, we're working on open sourcing the gRPC APIs that are underneath T-Cloud, as well as the web UI you see through Temporal Cloud. So that's in process, and we're also starting a project to add a REST API, as well as a Terraform operator. And if anybody is interested in Terraform operator, and want to partner or help influence that design, please come find me at Replay or reach out over Slack, and we'd love to work with you. Right now that CLI requires a single sign-on for authentication. So we are in a preview release of API keys capability to use for authentication. And we're also working on that service account feature, and we're looking to release that later this year. Everything we're doing again is really focused on individual operations as well as bulk operations, so that you can manage and work with users one at a time or many, and the same with namespaces. So if any of this is of interest to you, we'd love to hear about it. Come out to Replay. Come find me. We'll connect you with our engineers, and again, just love the interaction and love to keep that going.
Hey, Jonathan, really quick question before we go to the next item. Are the Terraform and Kubernetes operators going to be open sourced, I presume?
Probably. I don't. We're not that far along on either one for me to provide specifics yet, those, Jim. But more than likely, yes, we'll provide those as an open source capability, because open source is at the core of what we do here.
That's great. I just like saying Kubernetes operator as much as I can. So, all right, sorry to interrupt, but there was a QA. I just wanted to answer that. So thanks, buddy.
Awesome. Yeah, sure thing. All right, Tasha, you're up now to talk about .NET.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jonathan. Hi there, I'm Tasha. I work on our developer ecosystem here at Temporal. And I'm really excited to share with you our latest addition to our lineup of SDKs, which is the .NET SDK. This is available in beta as of this week, and we're really excited to share it with you and to start getting some feedback. We've actually already received some feedback from earlier this week when the beta was kicked off officially. So if you haven't tried it out yet and you are a .NET user, I encourage you to do that. This is really language agnostic as far as .NET goes. So whatever languages are supported by .NET, you can use with this SDK. It is incredibly feature rich, and we're really treating this as a first-class citizen in our lineup. So whenever we have new features rolling out to the platform, .NET SDK will be right there with Go and Java and TypeScript when we are adding those new feature implementations to the SDKs. We really want you to give us your feedback. And if you're a little hesitant about using the beta, I definitely wouldn't worry about that, because it's incredibly performant. It also has great resource utilization, and it has type-safe APIs. And if we make any breaking changes between now and GA, we're really making sure that we note those in the release notes. So definitely encourage you to try that out. You can check it out on GitHub. The package is available on NuGet. And we also have some other resources available for you if you're trying to use this. So on the right hand of the screen, you'll see an example of an activity implementation. So activities in .NET are implemented, or they're just delegates. So you can see the activity method here with the activity attribute added at the top. And this entire example is in a blog post that you can see now on our blog. It's just like a one-click add to cart or checkout kind of sample. So you can see workflows and activity implementation in .NET there. There are some things to note if you are going to use the .NET SDK. So we don't have full control of the event loop. And so that means .NET isn't sandboxed. This SDK isn't sandboxed. So there's some things to pay attention to if you use it. Particularly, we try to make sure you stay away from using .NET timers and make sure that you're doing all task calls on the current task queue, just to ensure that your workflow is deterministic. if that's something that you're really interested in, we have a lot of information about workflow determinism out there, including a webinar, it's on YouTube now, that you can see about constraining language environments to ensure workflow determinism that was given by one of our engineers. So that's definitely something that you can check out. Also in the realm of developer ecosystems is our new VS Code plugin for TypeScript workflows. This is for all my TypeScript users out there. And this extension is available now. So if you go to VS Code extensions, wherever you install them regularly, you'll see the temporal extension. And you can use this for debugging your TypeScript workflows. You can do this in a few different ways. Once you have some workflow history to work with, you can either use a workflow ID, or you can choose a history file to load in, and then you can use this extension to debug your workflows. It's really cool because you can set breakpoints not only within the code, but also within that workflow history. So you can get information about what exactly is happening during your execution. And this is just one of the things that we're trying to do, in addition to adding SDKs to improve that developer experience from start to finish. So whether that's working with our DevRel team and education and docs to better enable you at the beginning, all the way to debugging those workflows, this is the type of thing that we're trying to invest in the upcoming year. And all of this information, somebody mentioned open source in the chat. All of our libraries are open source. So if you are interested in logging issues or feature requests, GitHub's the place to go. And if you want to talk to our developers, definitely check out our community Slack. We have targeted channels for all of our SDKs where you can interact directly with the developers there. And if you're coming to replay, I definitely encourage you to do that, because we will have birds of a feather sessions for each one of our SDKs, where you can informally chat with and hear from our engineers who work on these tools directly. And that's a great place to make your voice heard, share your use cases with us. We want to hear from you so that we can take your use cases into account when we're building these things, because it's really all about you. And I really look forward to meeting you in person at Replay if you're going to be there. We'll also have one other session about the developer ecosystem as a whole. So we'll be talking about not only birds of a feather sessions, but also a larger look at the developer ecosystem and what is coming next. And with that, I will hand it over to Jim to take us into our next session.
And you think you learn about mute after like how many years of COVID and Zoom. All right, so the next section of our roadmap is really about adaptability. And adaptability is really, how does temporal work beyond, your first adoption of it, and how does it work and apply across other projects and into other things and work virally within your organization, and how do you help others kind of be successful with this? And we've seen this happen in, countless organizations. It starts off with a handful of people using temporal, one person brings it in, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, there's several people using temporal. So adaptable is really about making it work within your environment and being adaptable so it can work as you grow, we grow. Things like versioning of workflows. I'm not gonna force. I was foreshadowing, Jonathan. I'll let you do.
Yeah, you steal my thunder.
I know I was gonna steal your thunder. Sorry. But, if you could kick off this section, it'd be great.
Yeah, awesome. So as Jim mentioned, we have a whole bunch happening from an adaptability perspective. And so we're going to highlight just a few items here today. Again, come out to the replay or reach out to us, and we'd love to engage, talk a little deeper. So we're going to talk about some projects happening in cloud around the concept of a hierarchy. And then Matt's going to walk us through some workflow update items that are really cool happening across all temporal. So with hierarchy, we hear a lot of feedback about really the different ways in which temporal users work. For instance, in some company, users and developers work as individuals. Maybe they work as members of teams. Some companies, developers work within a single business unit. Some are working across business units. In other companies, developers build software for one or more projects. And, often these, of course, are being deployed in different environments such as prod, test, non-prod. And we're hearing a lot of feedback about the desire from some companies to actually restrict developer access to specific teams or business units, provide isolation across projects and environments. And then, in this ways of working concept, we also hear a lot about the financial side of things. So, how do companies support chargeback models or attribute information to the right business unit? And really all of these different ways of working, companies are looking at Temporal and Temporal Cloud to align to the ways of working. So we plan to address, and we're kicking off some projects around this ways of working. And really, we're doing this under an umbrella we just simply call hierarchy. And my friend and colleague Pierre says it beautifully. But hierarchy for us right now really includes kind of 3 different types of hierarchies. So we have a user hierarchy, a namespace or resource hierarchy, not sure what we're going to call that yet, and then a finance hierarchy. So let me give you a little context about the user problems we intend to solve within each of these hierarchies. So from a user hierarchy perspective, there's a little bit of user lifecycle management here. And so we get asked, how can I use my identity provider, for example, to implement user lifecycle management? So I can onboard, offboard users from my identity provider and have that, whatever I've set in my identity provider be reflected within Temporal. And the idea here is, I don't want to ever have to manage users, create them, remove them within Temporal itself. And, that's not very hierarchical. What becomes hierarchy here is the second layer that we're seeing on top of this, which is how can I use maybe my identity provider or HR systems or maybe other corporate provisioning sources to manage user access roles. And in this kind of user problem, there is a concept of a team somewhere defined within our user's company, and whether again that's in the identity provider or maybe that's persisted in a SAML token. And we are being asked to provide the concept of a team or a group of users within Temporal, and to use that team concept or that group map concept to map groups to Temporal permission set. So, as long as the permission sets are configured, this team can access these namespaces. As soon as a user is onboarded into Temporal with the right team, they'll get the right access to the right namespaces. So namespace and resource hierarchy, there's a really kind of 3 main user problems here we're looking at, which is the first is, how can I group my namespaces and manage those resources underneath the namespaces, that group of namespaces as a single entity. And that's for configuration possibly, or really the second problem, which is, how can I separate and restrict access across those different groups of namespaces. And this is typically for compliance reasons or security reasons or organization policies and billing policies. We also get requests around isolation with regards to specific environments. And that's kind of that leads to the third problem, user problem we're looking at solving with the resource or namespace hierarchy, which is how can I lock down a namespace or group of namespaces to truly restrict access to the features that are available for users in that namespace, or the configuration options, or the APIs or permissions. So that's kind of the 3 main user problems we're looking to solve underneath the namespace hierarchy. And finally, for the finance hierarchy, this is all about really providing affordances for an elevated user that has permissions to manage cost attribution. So how can I associate a cost center to a group of namespaces or individual namespaces? And how can I, as a finance team member, manage that cost allocation or that cost center attribution, maybe get some information from Temporal Cloud around usage, but I don't want to ever be able to have the ability to change actual configurations within the hierarchy or within namespaces, and I certainly don't want to ever actually see sensitive data. So the finance hierarchy is essentially how do I manage cost center attribution to support chargeback models, rate card systems, and how can I do that with an elevated user that has affordances to work across all of the groups within my account, but at a limited elevated permission set. So the projects that we're kicking off right now underneath and plan to deliver the second half of this year to provide affordances for hierarchy include providing a scheme-based IDP synchronization. That project's kicking off right now, so that's fun. In addition to that, we're looking at how can we use groups, whether from SCIM or SAML, and provide a mapping into teams, so people can automatically get the right permissions based on their teams defined within their organization. Of course, we're providing a resource or namespace hierarchy. And again, that's going to provide grouping and isolation capabilities. We're also providing a control policy. And a control policy goes above and beyond typical RBAC so that global admins can specify the maximum permissions available for an environment or a resource or role or account or service. And control policies basically restrict access to the features, configurations, APIs, or permissions and resources that users can use within any level of the hierarchy. And finally, we're providing financial controls to enable those finance team members to manage cost center allocation and their roll-ups, to do some investigation into usage, all with that specialized limited permission set but elevated role. So again, come on out to replay or reach out to us if you have any questions or curious about these, and we'd love to engage. So Matt, I think I'm going to turn it over to you next to talk about workflow update.
Hey everybody. I'm Matt. I'm a dev experience product manager. One of the things that we've been looking at is how can we continue to improve the experience of the developers that are using Temporal. The use case that we're going to talk about today is actually this combination of using Signal and Query together, where you'll send some data up to your workflow that may change the state, and then later you'll actually run a query to get that data. We've heard that this works well, but not in every single situation. As well, it adds a little bit of extra latency because you have to wait for the signal to finish and then send the query up. So what we've done is we've actually started creating a piece of functionality that we're calling Workflow Update. This is basically the best of both worlds. So you will actually be able to send data to your workflow and get a response without the extra turnaround time, and you can actually validate the payload using a validator method that will provide access. You'll be able to actually add that into the workflow update itself. What this will allow is for use cases such as API calls that update a workflow, or other services that are calling and updating a workflow. Maybe you even have webhook data, customer data coming in, and you want to make sure that that data, the validator will make sure that it basically passes muster according to what you need to validate before anything happens in the workflow history. One thing that we were really thinking about here was the use case of a system sending a bad payload and then constantly causing an update to happen on a workflow. And we wanted to help prevent that because, as you may know, our value prop is to try to remove as much cruft from your code as we can. So this is coming soon. It's actively being worked on, and we are validating it, and we hope to have that out as soon as we possibly can. There will be more updates on this at replay. And I'm also available in the community Slack channel. You can just @ Matt Bernier. If you have any questions about developer experience, workflow update, and as sort of a tease, a new method of versioning workflows, let me know. Thank you so much.
Back to Jim. All right, y'all. So the final section of our roadmap, and gosh, by all means, we are really hitting the tips of the waves here in terms of all the things that are going on. We'll show you the overall roadmap of all the items that we're actually working on at the end of this section as well, y'all. But the last section is really about, is really about applicability. And again, we have these certain classes of applications and use cases that people want to use Temporal for. How do we make these things a bit more easy or a bit more kind of approachable, using the other part of our roadmap terms here, for people to actually go out and use Temporal for however you all want to do it? If we have, dozens of people on this call, if I asked each one of you, how are you using Temporal? Gosh, man, there's dozens of ways in which people are doing it, and probably 2x the number of answers of each person. And so, we focused a lot of time in making sure that, Temporal, just at its core, is going to be basically applicable across all these various different cases. So That is the third section of our roadmap. So again, it's approachable, adaptable, and applicable. Jonathan, do you want to kick off the applicable section?
Well, actually, I'm going to take it, Jim.
I messed up.
Yeah.
Our
No,
hierarchy king.
That's totally fine. Cool. Well, thanks, everyone. Really excited to be chatting with you about it. So, I mean, one of the cool things, please come join us at Replay, because not only you're going to get really cool swag, like what we did this big dinosaur last year, and I think Candice is going to talk about the theme, but you're also going to have a chance to, meet with your peers and really know about their use cases and why they're using Temporal. And I think, Jim, you're absolutely right. Like, this is what applicability is about. It's really, we are always listening to your feedback and kind of like trying to support more use cases. So today we want to have time to kind of like announce all the cool feature that's coming around that theme. Like, for example, we're going to be adding a new Mumbai region. But today we're going to focus really around like three main feature. First, I'm going to start and talk about Temporal, what we're launching on Temporal Cloud, which is global namespace. It's really cool and a weighted feature. And then Ryland is going to talk about our support for HTTP APIs, and also what we are doing in case your workflow needs to, support like larger payload. Do you mind moving one slide? Thank you, Jonathan. All right, cool. So Temporal, at the end of the day, is all about reliability. You trust us, with your application. From the beginning, we launched Temporal and Temporal Cloud. You've trusting us with production workload. But some of your workload, and typically like the most critical one, have requirements for one higher level SLA. You've been pushing us on that. And also some of your application, or some of you clearly just have requirements around multi-regional support. Till then, it was not really a good fit for us, but now with global namespace, we're going to be able to take on your most critical application effectively. And so one of the really important things to understand with the experience with providing with Temporal Cloud, it's really around this concept of namespace as a service. And so with namespace as a service, what we wanted to do is really have you focus on your code, on your application. Like, we don't want you to worry about the infrastructure. We don't want you to worry about cluster management or anything like that. It's really centered around you being able to like run your code and write your code. So if you're familiar with Temporal and some of the feature that's part of the project, you may have heard of something called multi-cluster replication. It's a feature that has been around for some time within Temporal. But when you use the multi-cluster replication, it's really still up to you to manage a lot of the infrastructure. So for example, if you want to do a failover, you need to think and worry about the routing layer, how you're going to do from networking standpoints, what's the cluster management, how to do upgrade, and all those things. So like a lot of things to rely if you want to do a failover. Well, with global namespace, none of that. We really are going after this namespace as a service experience, which means you don't worry about any of that. You have a simple endpoint, you connect to it, it's easy to configure, and you get all the benefit of the global namespace. So one of the really cool things that now you are getting, because the experience is so integrated, well, you get access to all the feature that Temporal Cloud provides on top of your namespace. So things like your observability metrics or audit logging, or features that are going to be coming, as Jonathan mentioned, like hierarchy, all of that would be embedded, and you would be able to use that on top of your global namespace. You really get in this like integrated experience and seamless experience where you don't worry about anything and just worry about your code and your application. So with Temporal, with global namespace and what we are offering, the thing to understand, it's basically rely on this asynchronous replication under the hood, which means that it effectively run in different regions. As I mentioned, different, basically your namespace run in different places. And so it means that your workflow or your long running workflow can make forward progress in a case of an outage. Or things like your signal or your queries are going to be forwarded basically to the active namespace. And so with that in mind, now, before we used to support 3 nines of SLA, which was already really cool and really important, but with global namespace, we're now going to be able to claim 4 nines of SLA, which is a huge deal for many of you. Not only that, but as you can see in this configuration, Well, with global namespace, you're going to be able to select the different region you want to work on. And so if you have requirements that forces you to run in different region, now you can directly select that simply and configure all of that, from like an integrated manner. So really powerful in terms of being able to use this feature. And we've been really thinking in terms of use cases when we deploy global namespace. And some of you actually really care about the 4.9 of SLA and not as much about the multi-regional support. But global namespace allows for it because you have a single endpoint that's really easy to connect to and that you leverage. Even if you decide to have one worker fleet that's running in one region, it would still work with global namespace. And so the way it works is we are going to be leveraging DNS to do the failover, and we're basically playing some tricks here. And with that, basically, even if DNS takes a bit of time to reconverge, you're actually going to be able to send the traffic and forward the traffic within the temporal cloud backbone to actually go to your active namespace. So really powerful feature and really powerful way of using it. But some of you have actually more advanced use cases. For example, some of you are requiring to connect to temporal cloud using private connectivity with something like AWS Private Link. Or some of you actually do have this multi-regional support, like many of your production applications. We see some fintech companies, for example, saying, hey, I need to be able to run into region no matter what, because I need to be able to survive a full outage from even basically the cloud provider region. So you need to be able to support that. Or even some of you actually care really about having low latency. And so you're trying to always have your worker as close as possible from your namespace. So no matter what use cases you have or your deployment model, all of that is going to work with global namespace. And so really excited. We're going to be demoing it and giving you access to it at Replay. So please come join us. We're going to do deep dive on it. And it's going to be a great chance for you to meet the engineering team and the product team and ask all your questions. So come and hear more about it. Ryland, I'm taking you now. It's on you to go through HTTP API and a large payload.
Awesome. Thank you, Pierre. So I'm really excited to share two super duper cool updates that we've been, working on for some time now that I think will really excite people. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is HTTP. So, Temporal has always strived to be a flexible and generic platform that could apply to use cases of all different shapes and sizes. And you can see manifestations of this across, our product. Some great examples are, like our idiomatic support for languages and our pluggable persistence model. And so when we first started the company and, we were freshly forked from Cadence, there was this legacy of Uber design that really stood in the way of making Temporal something that many of our users or prospective users could apply to their use cases. And that was this protocol called Thrift that the product was originally built with. And so regardless of your opinions on, Thrift itself, it's by no means the top industry standard for doing RPC. And so we continuously found users who felt, their use cases couldn't be solved due to our lack of support for gRPC, the standard at that time, and even today for doing structured RPC calls in a distributed environment. And so the overwhelming feedback and hate for Thrift pushed us to have one of probably, if not the first, product development efforts for Temporal, which was support for gRPC and mutual TLS. And so when gRPC support eventually shipped, any doubts we had about the importance disappeared pretty much immediately. For months, we had users approach us, saying that gRPC support was the final piece they needed to push Temporal within their company or, for their use case. And so 3 years later, it's needless to say, we're very happy with our choice to move away from Thrift and rely on gRPC. gRPC is definitely the right choice for a lot of people, and it's here to stay. But it's not the right choice for everyone. And that's why I'm super excited to announce something that I think is almost as big as our historical choice to support gRPC, which is HTTP support for Temporal Server. HTTP support has been one of the most common requests I personally received at my time here, and I know I'm definitely not alone. I hear people talking about users asking for it all the time. And so while HTTP may not be as popular for structured RPC, we all know that it's the standard of the biggest distributed system in existence, the internet. And so HTTP support opens up so many exciting avenues and usages of Temporal that weren't previously possible. So when our HTTP support lands, it will finally be possible to call Temporal server directly from a browser, or even using curl, which is very, very exciting. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here on the HTTP front and not say too much more. If you want to dive into specifics and hear more about our plans in fullness, you'll have to come to replay. Super cool. Awesome. Now, an almost equally, maybe even more exciting feature. I think many people may have kind of dealt with this one personally, which is large payloads. And so, one of my favorite parts about working at Temporal is the purity we apply to helping users solve their problems. I can personally say that Max, who's our CEO, instilled the belief in me from the beginning that it's our top duty to give users an honest analysis of things, even if that means telling them to not use Temporal. And so what that results in is that, like, in the course of my time here, I've told a lot of people to not use Temporal. And in most of those cases, I leave the call feeling just as good as if I'd converted like a giant company into, using Temporal and being a Temporal user, because we want developers to be successful, and pushing Temporal where it doesn't make sense won't result in that. So that being said, there are a few usage patterns that I commonly see and other people see from users, which are less black and white in terms of whether Temporal is a good fit. And while Temporal may not be the perfect solution for these use cases, it's not clear that there is a better alternative. And so in these instances, we still lead with honesty, and we try our best to lay out the options users have and what the trade-offs are. And so while there's a handful of these not perfect for Temporal, but not clearly there's a better option usage patterns we see regularly, there's one single one that we see fundamentally more than all the others. And I'm talking about a situation where within your Temporal code, your business process or application needs to deal with large payloads. And I want to make it super clear that I'm not talking about Temporal as like a big data platform. That's not our market. If you need MapReduce, use Hadoop, Jonathan. I'm sure you'll love that. And so what I'm specifically talking about here are the large payloads which are required for everyday business processes. As you all may know, right now there's this hard limit of 2 megabytes for any input or output passed to Temporal. And in many cases, users have use cases which are perfectly suited for Temporal, all but for a 3 megabyte payload. In other cases, the payloads can be substantially larger to the point where it's impossible to redesign things to work with Temporal, but from every other point of view, Temporal is a great fit. And so users who encounter this design conundrum often choose to use a non-temporal solution. Others build like an in-temporal solution that usually, have something to do with manually serializing a payload into a blob store like S3 and then storing it, instead of storing it directly in Temporal. And so if what I just described sounds like something you've encountered or, built or worked around or been frustrated by, our large payload support is going to, make you very, very happy. And so there's obviously a ton more details and aspects of, this functionality that you should be super duper excited about. But if you want to hear more, you're going to have to come to replay. Cool. Hand it back to you, Jim.
All right. Like I said at the beginning, y'all, this is directional. We chose kind of tips of the waves so we can do this in about, we said 45 minutes, y'all. Pretty good. I'm up 46 minutes past the hour, including all my blathering at the beginning about logistics and whatnot. So thank you all for kind of going through everything. Everybody on the call, like, there's a lot of things here that we didn't talk about. I'm excited about a couple of the things in here that, some of the things I think you come out to replay and, when we start to talk about some of the search improvements in the web UI, and I'm super excited to see some of that stuff. Matt smiles because I know he's been working hard on that, I'm really happy we talked about the multi-region stuff today, and global namespace, Pierre, is just really exciting because what does it take to actually do that by yourself, let alone just have somebody take care of kind of this failover. I've lived in the world of failover and kind of reliability and systems for really quite some time. So I'm super excited about like those sort of things. And then, this whole thing around hierarchy and what we can do there, enabling teams to really have it really be adaptable and work the way that, our teams work. Those are kind of three things I'm really excited about. The observability stuff, I think, will be really interesting when we get to replay some of the stuff that we're doing about exposing metrics across your cluster and these sort of things. Lots going on, y'all. And, some pretty busy set of product managers. So first of all, but before we get to QA, Jonathan Lacefield, by the way, thank you for corralling all of the groups, all the fiefs together to make this all come together. Y'all, it's doing a roadmap presentation across a bunch of different people is not a simple task. But there are some questions, and I'm going to answer. I'm going to go through some of them relatively quickly. We'll get through everything. Actually, Jonathan, you want to leave it on the roadmap, the overall roadmap slide? Yeah, that way, if anybody has a question on one of these things, maybe we could touch on it lightly in this session, y'all, but just to spur some thought here. But very early on, about 2-3 minutes into our talk, somebody was asking about more concrete timelines in terms of the REST APIs. I think Ryland, I think you're best to answer that. Is that correct?
Yeah, but it's going to be a short answer, which is
Exactly.
there's no concrete timeline right now. It's coming soon. TM.
I like that.
Yeah, and just to augment Ryland's, we have really 2 HTTP or REST APIs coming. We have the core temporal server one that Ryland's talking about, which has a little bit more uncertainty to the delivery timeline. For cloud, we're looking at the second half of this year to automate cloud operations. Yeah, to work with the control, what we call the control plane of cloud, if you will.
Yeah. And so speaking about control plane, thank you, Jonathan, for kicking me off into the next question. We talked about our Terraform operator as well. And somebody was asking if they could get a little bit more details and kind of what the Terraform operator would allow people to do in this kind of like, I guess, first vision or first phase of this. I'm not sure who owns the Terraform. Is that you, Jonathan?
Pierre and I, yeah, we partner on that. And the basic request is, so a lot of details still being worked out on specifics on what operations will be exposed to the Terraform operator, but we know we want to provide the ability for the creation of namespaces and everything that goes around that. So generating certs, rotating certs, again, search attributes, region alignment, kind of like where things are going to be deployed and spun up. That is a big focus. And then, we have some work to do to really define functionality, if and how we want to provide any kind of user lifecycle or access management capabilities in there as well. But go ahead, Pierre.
Yeah, I was quickly to add, especially related to the question I think that Michelle was asking. I think like the way we're thinking of this Terraform operator is really focusing on the platform administrator using Temporal Cloud. And so, a lot of the platform administrator wants to be able to create namespaces, wants to be able to create users on demand. And so we're first going to be focusing on kind of like that control plane aspect that Jonathan mentioned. And I think some of your question was more related to like maybe more like developer side of it. But so the first iteration of that one is more focused for the platform administrator.
Cool. Thanks, guys. So a quick question from our friends at, I believe, Salesforce here. Is there any plans to support the audit logging features that we have in cloud for kind of self-hosted open source implementations? That's a broad one across a lot of people here. Who wants to take that one?
I can take it. At least right now, there's no, as far as I know, there's no intention to do that. It's not something we're like diametrically opposed to, but it's not something that we have a pressing priority for.
Right. Cool. So I'm going to go into, there's a handful of kind of global namespace and just namespace questions. Pierre, I think mostly this is your world. But let's just start with, is there any plans to label namespaces, like dev, unit test, prod, that sort of stuff, so that, people can get better control? Like some of the use cases might be, rolling out upgrades to different environments and that sort of stuff. I think we talked about this in the context of hierarchy. And so is there a plan to kind of apply that capability?
Just for everyone, as a French guy, hierarchy is one of those terms that's really funky for me to say. So if you keep on getting the job, it's exactly where it's coming from. Yeah, I think, Jim, that's exactly, I think it's an important feature that we've heard many times. We're thinking about it through like 2 different lenses. One is especially around that, giving the availability for user to tag on Temporal Cloud between a dev namespace versus a prod namespace. Then from that, what we could do is basically say, we're going to be rolling out new feature first on your dev namespaces, giving you a bit of time. And then once you've been able to test those features, then kind of like roll basically feature to prod differently. So that's something we are thinking. We don't have like a concrete timeline on it, but happy to talk more. But yeah, absolutely, like that's something we're thinking. The other part that we want to add is things like metadata and description, just in general, to make, like searching your namespaces or flagging your namespaces differently. Part of the hierarchy project that Jonathan talked about is also thinking about some of that stuff. So a lot more to come around that, but no concrete timeline, but still like a high priority for us.
Yeah, and just to put a fine point on it. Yes, right. We want to provide affordances so you can tell us where your namespace lives, which environment. So it's all a matter of how, and that's what we're in the process of doing.
I love the namespace questions, y'all, especially for cloud. I think people think about these things in their own internal environments as well. And I think one of the questions I had for you last week, Pierre, when we were talking about global namespace was, this asynchronous replication. I know you described this a little bit, but, is there a chance for things to be out of sync during failover as you go from, one region to the next?
Yeah, and so I mean, it's a really good question that probably takes more than a couple of minutes to answer. But yeah, I think that's one. The fact for us for asynchronous replication give us some huge advantages in terms of latency on how quickly we can reply to requests or things like that. But it comes with a cost, which could be there's a bit of a replication lag that can happen basically between the two namespaces. Fortunately, Temporal has this notion of like a version history, which means that actually when we do failover, we save all those events and then we kind of like increase basically the history for that. And so we start building kind of like a tree structure that allows to make sure that no matter what, we can make forward progress on your workflow. And then kind of like it could be on you to do conflict resolution. We do many things, like, for example, we're going to re-inject, external events like signals in the history before we discard it, or like we do many things around that. So short answer is yes, that's kind of like what happened with replication, but we're doing a lot of stuff and providing a lot of feature around it to help you with that.
And we'll provide more detail as the feature kind of rolls out, y'all. The blog posts, technical details, docs, that sort of stuff to really help you understand how this works. Quite honestly, the global namespace and failover is not a simple problem to solve. I know we've been working on it for a while, Pierre, and so congrats on like being almost near the end of this journey and getting it kind of moving. But somebody else had asked like, hey, how does this apply to particular kind of verticals like in commerce and retail? And I always think about it kind of at the use case level, right? Like it depends on how reliable your use case needs to be. Do you need failover? Is this like a payment processing engine where you can't lose money? That sort of stuff. I think it really depends on like the value of the workflow or the workload that you're actually doing. But ultimately, I think if you're running self-hosted, oh man, this removes a whole world of complexity, a whole world of cost. From an infrastructure and kind of, just the way we're able to do it very kind of efficiently, I think is a big deal here. Are there any other like use cases beyond kind of the reliability thing, Pierre, that you're thinking about that this might open up in terms of like different types of workflows that this might happen? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that the key thing is reliability for nines and multi-region. Over time, it's going to help with actually stuff like migration, especially if you want to go to like self-hosted to cloud or things like that, because it's going to help basically being able to sharpen things like long-running workflows that you could be running on self-hosted to cloud, or vice versa. Also, like we really, always thriving basically for this open source mindset and giving you freedom. So a lot of features that are going to be building on top of that for sure.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see it get out into use and the emergence of the way that people use this feature should be pretty interesting. People get pretty creative pretty quick. So I'm done talking to you about global namespace, Pierre. I love you. I love talking cloud. But actually,
join us at Replay. Come meet me.
Somebody actually, this is a great question as well, because there's a feature called versioning that we're rolling as part of our product. Probably one of the most requested features in the history of this company. And somebody was asking, we talked about it, we alluded to it. Is there a preview? What's going on? Matt Bernier, what's going on with versioning?
Got to come to Replay.
Oh my God, dude. Come on.
I'll give you a little bit more. We have heard a lot about the current state of versioning in Temporal, and that while it works and you can do quite a bit with it, it's not exactly as user friendly or developer friendly as it could be. And so we have actually been working on revamping the versioning functionality, and it will be much simpler to use. Temporal will aid you in using versioning, and will actually expose quite a bit of more information than you're getting today from the current versioning. I am going to leave it at that, though.
That's great.
We will, like most products, have a private preview for certain features. So if that is something that you're interested in, the person who asked here, hit me up on the community Slack and we can chat. And get you in there early.
That's awesome, Matt. And I will share with one of our speakers at Replay joined us over for this talk, and their response was in QA. I don't know if everybody saw it, but it was like versioning, exclamation point. Like, I think the world will renounce and will be overjoyed to see this roll, buddy. I'm really excited about it. Actually, our speaker from Twilio was asking, so an ex-peer of yours. So,
yep.
Final question, and I got to bring in what I call our 6th product manager to answer this, because talk about doing a lot of work and a lot of the carrying of like the heavy weight around here. Candace actually runs our design and UI team here, or not UI, but all things that the look and feel of Temporal is actually run through Candace and her team. And quite honestly, it's not just the look and feel, it's a lot of the flow and the way it works and making it correct for the user experience. So it's truly UX here. And so Candace is the genesis of the astronaut with a skull. And somebody asked very, very early on, why is this our mascot for Replay? So Candace, I'm going to let you answer this.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Hey, everyone. So last year we made the intentional decision to go really wild and out of band with Replay. This isn't a Temporal conference. This is a backend engineering conference that's put on by Temporal. So we really want to separate the Temporal brand identity from Replay, the work hard and play hard. More specifically, we want to create a vibe that every year that's fun and creative and loose and stimulating and relaxed, so that fosters new neurons connections and organic conversations and the free sharing of ideas. So this year's theme is "There's nothing to fear here." This is our 2nd year of Replay, so we're taking it to the next level by introducing the space skeleton monster to our experiential design, where the space skeleton monster serves as a metaphor for all the challenges developers face building what's next. So the presentations, discussions, and workshops will deep dive into the latest trends and best practices in backend engineering that will come together to empower the attendees to eliminate the monsters that haunt them in their code and infrastructure. So there really is nothing to fear here. We really want the attendees to feel like they're embarking on an epic journey where they can conquer anything that comes their way. Replay is not just a conference, it's an adventure, and we can't wait for you to join us. So head over to temporal.io/replay, use the promo webinar20, and we'll see you there.
Man, from the heart, I hear you, Candace. Thank you so much, Candace, for joining us at the 11th hour there. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And thank you, product managers, for all the hard work that y'all put in to really help define the future of the Temporal project, and really a lot of the stuff that happens in our customer implementations. Y'all, people have said it a bunch of times. Please join us Replay, of course. I'm not going to say it again, but join us in Slack and participate in the conversation. I think every one of the product managers here feed off of input from y'all that were on this session today. And quite honestly, they're just a really good collection of some really nice people. That are kind of good to know. You can meet them live at Replay, or you can meet them on Slack, or you reach out to them in email, that sort of stuff. But we're always happy to talk to you about these sort of things. So with that, I thank you all, attendees and presenters, again for doing this today. Really wonderful content. I hope everybody here enjoyed it. Replay is coming up in September, and then finally a recording of this, if you want to share it with your friends and peers. Will be available on our website, in our YouTube channel, I should say, relatively soon. So with that, we're signing off. Everybody give a wave, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Have a great day.